He laughed when I told him I wanted to live. Not just exist, not just survive, but actually live. Maybe that's the cruelest part, how he made me feel like a joke in my own story. And yet, here I am, standing in front of him, pulse racing, knowing that one careless glance from his eyes could ruin me forever. New York never sleeps, but it sure as hell swallows you whole if you're not careful. I had always kept my head down, working 2 jobs, paying bills, trying not to be noticed. But fate, if you can call it that, had different plans. I wasn't just noticed. I was taken. He was known in the streets as Adrian Russo, the Ruthless Mafia boss who ruled the underworld with an iron fist and an icy stare. A man you didn't cross if you wanted to see another sunrise. And me? Just an ordinary guy, Leo Carter, who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. When his men dragged me into his penthouse, I thought it was the end. Instead, he made me an offer, or maybe it was a command. "You'll be mine," he said, voice cold enough to freeze my veins. Not as an employee, not as a prisoner, as my lover. I wanted to scream, to tell him to go to hell. But his eyes, dark and burning, didn't leave room for refusal. And in that moment, the city outside seemed so far away, and my world tilted into something unrecognizable. First, it was torture. Every touch, every glance, every word from him felt like chains wrapping tighter around me. I hated the way my body betrayed me, the way my heart raced whenever he stood too close. He was supposed to be my captor, my tormentor. Yet, there was something in him, something broken, raw, and lonely that called to me in ways I didn't understand. Nights stretched long in that lavish cage of a penthouse. He would pour himself whiskey, sit by the window, and watch the city like it belonged to him. And maybe it did. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, pretending I didn't notice when his gaze lingered on me for too long. One night I snapped. "What do you want from me?" I asked, voice trembling with equal parts fear and fury. He didn't look at me at first. He just swirled the amber liquid in his glass and sighed. "I want something real," he said softly, "and I'm willing to take it, even if it kills me." That was the first crack in his armor. The first glimpse of the man behind the monster. The next weeks blurred into a dangerous dance. He taught me the rules of his world, the corruption, the blood, the betrayals lurking in every corner. I hated it, hated him. But when danger knocked at the door, when rivals tried to rip me away, it was his arms I found myself clinging to. I began to see him not just as a boss, not just as a captor, but as a man haunted by his own past. A man who had everything, yet nothing at all. And against my will, I started to care. Love wasn't supposed to bloom in the shadows. It wasn't supposed to grow from fear, from chains, from pain. But sometimes, love doesn't ask permission. It just happens. And once it takes root, it doesn't let go. The first time Adrian touched me without force, I nearly forgot how to breathe. It wasn't violent. It wasn't possessive. It was hesitant. Like his hand wasn't meant to linger. Like maybe he was afraid of breaking something fragile. And I hated that my body noticed. Days in his penthouse blurred into a rhythm I despised but couldn't escape. Mornings filled with silence. Nights drowned in the clink of ice against glass. His men came and went, delivering updates about wars I wanted no part of, about money, about threats that seemed endless. I would sit quietly, pretending not to listen, but every word lodged itself in my mind like shards of glass. Sometimes, I caught him watching me. Not with lust, though that was there too, but with something deeper. Something almost human. One night, after his men left, I dared to ask, "Why me? Out of all the people in this city, why did you choose me?" Adrian leaned back, his face half in shadow. "Because you weren't afraid of me that night." I scoffed, bitterness sharp in my throat. I was terrified. His lips curved, but not into a smile. More like the ghost of one. "You hid it well. Do you know how rare that is? To see someone look me in the eyes and not crumble? It made me wonder. Wonder what? What it would be like," he said, voice lowering. "To have someone look at me and see more than the monster. I should have been angry. I should have reminded him that I hadn't chosen this. that he'd stolen me from my life. But instead, his words echoed in the hollow places of my chest. Because wasn't that what I wanted too? For someone to see me, really see me, in a world that didn't care whether I existed? I hated the part of me that understood him. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday. We'd been arguing again. I'd accused him of treating me like property, of caging me while pretending to offer something more. His temper flared, and for a moment I thought he'd strike me. Instead, he slammed his fist into the wall so close to my head that plaster rained down on my shoulders. "Do you think I enjoy this?" he shouted, eyes burning. "Do you think I wanted you here?" My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. "Then let me go." His jaw tightened. He was shaking not from rage, but from something rawer, darker. He grabbed my face, not gently, not cruelly, just desperately. "I can't." Rain hammered against the windows, thunder growled across the sky, and for the first time, I saw him as a man fighting himself more than me. His breath was ragged, his forehead pressed against mine, and suddenly we weren't captor and captive anymore. We were two broken souls colliding. His lips brushed mine brief, trembling, like a secret slipping free. My body betrayed me, kissed him back. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was fire meeting gasoline, hungry and reckless. A kiss that tasted like war and surrender all at once. When we finally pulled apart, both of us gasping, I realized there was no going back. The days after that kiss were dangerous. Not because of his enemies, though they were always there, lurking in every shadow, but because of what was happening between us. The lines blurred. He wasn't just the mafia boss anymore. He was Adrian, the man who pressed coffee into my hands in the morning. The man who let me win arguments just to see me smile. The man whose laughter, rare and rough, felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. And I hated that I loved it, because every time I started to believe he was more than the monster, reality came crashing back. The phone calls in the dead of night, the bruises on his knuckles, the names of men who disappeared after crossing him. I wanted to believe in him, but the blood on his hands never washed away. One evening, after a long silence, I asked, "Do you ever regret it? The things you've done?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared out the window, the city lights painting his face in fragments of gold and shadow. Finally, he said, "Every day. But regret doesn't change a damn thing. Power does. Control does. And if I lose either, I lose everything including you." The way he said it made my stomach twist, because for the first time, I realized just how deep I was in his world. I wasn't just a stolen lover. I was his weakness. And in his world, weakness got people killed. The first threat came sooner than I expected. A rival gang made their move, ambushing us when Adrian insisted on taking me out of the penthouse. Just a simple dinner he'd promised. "You need fresh air, Leo. You need to remember there's a world beyond these walls." We never made it to the restaurant. Bullets shattered the night as black SUVs boxed us in. Adrian's men fought back, the chaos deafening. I remember ducking behind him, my hands shaking, the metallic scent of gunpowder filling my lungs. He pulled me close, shielding me with his own body, and shouted orders I barely understood. When it was over, when the asphalt was littered with bodies and the sirens wailed in the distance, Adrian turned to me, his suit torn, his arm bleeding. He cupped my face with blood-stained hands and whispered, "You see, this is why I can't let you go." Tears blurred my vision, because I finally understood. Loving him wasn't just dangerous. It was fatal. But as his forehead pressed against mine again, as his breath trembled against my lips, I also knew something else. I wasn't leaving. Not now. Not ever. I used to believe the worst thing that could happen was being trapped by Adrian Russo. I was wrong. The worst thing is realizing how easily the world can take him away from me. After the ambush, everything changed. Adrian became more protective, more controlling, wrapping me tighter in his world. His men followed me from room to room, and the penthouse turned from a cage into a fortress. But even steel walls couldn't keep out betrayal. It started with whispers, A trusted lieutenant who stopped meeting Adrian's eyes. A courier who delivered empty envelopes. Money missing from accounts. I didn't understand the details, but I felt the shift in the air, the paranoia. The sleepless nights. The way Adrian's jaw clenched tighter each day. One evening, I found him alone in his office, papers scattered across the desk, his hand shaking as he poured whiskey. "Talk to me," I said softly. He looked up, shadows carved under his eyes. "Someone close to me is feeding information to the enemy." My chest tightened. "And you don't know who?" His silence was answer enough. It should have been his battle alone. I wasn't part of this world, not really. But when I reached out and touched his hand, he didn't pull away. He just whispered, almost broken, "I can't lose you, Leo. Not to them. Not to anyone." I wanted to tell him he wouldn't, but promises felt cheap when bullets could cut them apart in seconds. The betrayal came faster than either of us expected. It was late. Adrian had left for a meeting, promising to be back before midnight. I sat on the sofa, trying not to pace, when the penthouse door burst open. Men I didn't recognize stormed in, their guns gleaming under the chandelier. I ran. Instinct, not strategy. My heart thundered as I darted down the hallway, but they caught me before I reached Adrian's room. Rough hands bound my wrists, a blindfold pressed over my eyes, and suddenly I was shoved into the back of a van. I screamed his name until my throat tore. Hours blurred. When the blindfold finally came off, I was in a warehouse, the stench of oil and rust filling my lungs. A man I vaguely recognized, one of Adrian's own, smirked at me. "You're the key," he said. "He thinks he's untouchable. But everyone breaks when you take away what they love." The words cut deeper than the ropes biting my wrists, because they were true. I was his weakness. When Adrian came for me, he was fire and fury incarnate. The doors of the warehouse slammed open, gunshots echoing, shouts reverberating in the air. His men poured in, but all I saw was him, Adrian, eyes wild, moving like a storm through the chaos. The traitor dragged me forward, pressing a gun to my temple. "One more step, Russo, and your pretty boy dies." Adrian froze. For a moment, the world held its breath. His gun was steady, but his voice shook. "Let him go. This is between you and me." The barrel dug harder against my skin. I could feel my pulse pounding against cold steel. And then, to my horror, Adrian lowered his weapon. "Please," he said. A single word, raw and ragged. Not the voice of a mafia boss, but of a man on the verge of breaking. I'd never heard him beg before. It was my turn to shatter. Because in that instant, I realized the truth. Adrian would sacrifice everything, his power, his empire, his life for me. And I couldn't let him. So I did the only thing I could. I slammed my head back into the traitor's face, pain exploding in my skull, and his grip faltered. Adrian moved like lightning, his shot clean and merciless. The man crumpled, and I collapsed into Adrian's arms, trembling. His hands shook as he untied me, his voice frantic against my ear. "Don't you ever do that again, Leo. Don't you ever risk yourself like that." I buried my face against his chest, sobbing. "I couldn't let you lose everything because of me." He pulled back, cupping my face, his own tears glistening. "You are everything." After that night, nothing between us was the same. The walls between us, the ones I'd built to protect myself, the ones he'd built to hide his scars, crumbled. I wasn't just his reluctant lover anymore. I was his partner, his confidant, the one person who could bring him to his knees without a weapon. But loving a man like Adrian wasn't simple. Each kiss carried the weight of danger. Each night together was a borrowed moment, stolen from a world that wanted us torn apart. And deep down, I knew the war wasn't over. His enemies wouldn't stop. Betrayal would come again. Yet, for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because love, once planted, grows stubbornly even in blood-soaked soil. And mine for Adrian had already taken root. I always thought happy endings weren't meant for people like me. Not for ordinary men stolen into a world of blood and power. Not for someone who loved the monster everyone else feared. But as dawn broke over New York, painting the sky with fragile shades of gold, I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. The weeks after the warehouse changed everything. Adrian didn't let me out of his sight. His men tightened their security, and rival names were crossed off his list one by one. But it wasn't the violence that haunted Might, was the way Adrian looked at me now, like I was the only reason he still breathed. At night, when the city quieted, he would pull me into his arms, his lips brushing against my hair as though he couldn't believe I was still there. I used to flinch at his touch, but now it anchored me. And yet I couldn't ignore the truth. This life, the guns, the blood, the shadows, was a noose around his neck, around ours. If we didn't cut it, it would strangle us both. Adrian, I whispered one night, my head resting on his chest, what if we left it all behind? He stiffened. Left? Yeah. The city, the empire, everything. Just you and me, somewhere no one knows us. For a long time, silence stretched between us. His heartbeat thudded against my ear, steady but heavy. Finally, he said, "You think it's that simple?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know this. If we stay, one of us won't survive. And I can't. I can't watch you bleed for me again." His hand tightened around mine. "Leo, I've spent my whole life fighting for this power. But when I almost lost you, I realized none of it mattered. Not if it means living without you." My breath caught. "So, you do it? Walk away?" He pressed his forehead to mine, eyes searching mine like he was looking for courage. "For you, yes. For us, yes." It wasn't easy. Adrian had to dismantle the empire he'd built brick by bloody brick. He couldn't just vanish without setting the pieces in place. There were men who wanted his throne, enemies waiting for weakness. He had to play it smart, tie off loose ends, hand the reins to someone he trusted. But every step of the way, he included me. He didn't hide things anymore. He told me about his past, the betrayals that carved him into steel, the losses that left scars deeper than bullets. And for the first time, I didn't see the mafia boss. I saw the boy he used to be, the one who once wanted more than power, the one who just wanted someone to love him without fear. We fought, of course. I was terrified. He was stubborn. There were nights we shouted until our throats went raw. But every fight ended the same, his hands on my face, his voice breaking, "Don't leave me," and my whispered promise, "I won't." The final battle came not with bullets, but with betrayal. One of Adrian's closest allies, someone he thought loyal, tried to seize control before Adrian could step down. It was chaos, another ambush, another night where the air smelled of smoke and fear. But this time, Adrian didn't fight alone. I was there, not with a gun. I could never take a life, but with my voice, my presence, my refusal to leave his side. And when it mattered most, when the knife was at his throat, it wasn't power or fear that saved him. It was loyalty. His men, the ones who truly loved him, chose Adrian over the traitor. When it was over, when the dust settled and the city's underworld crowned someone new, Adrian looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Freedom. We left New York at sunrise. No bodyguards, no weapons. Just 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket out of the city that had tried to devour us. The train rattled through miles of countryside, carrying us farther from the life we once knew. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Adrian sat beside me, his hand warm over mine, his gaze softer than I'd ever seen. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Leaving?" He nodded. I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder. "Not for a second." "Do you?" He kissed my hair, his lips trembling. "Not for a lifetime. Now, when I wake up in the mornings, it's not to the sound of gunfire or whispered threats. It's to sunlight streaming through thin curtains, to the smell of coffee Adrian somehow always gets wrong but tries anyway, to the sound of his laughter, rare, rough, but real. He still carries his shadows. I still carry my fears. But together, they don't feel so heavy anymore. I was forced into his arms by fear, by power, by a world that didn't care what it broke. But somewhere along the way, those arms became home. And if you asked me now what the most precious thing he ever gave me was, it wouldn't be safety. It wouldn't be riches. It would be the truth that even in the darkest places, love can bloom, that even monsters can be loved, and that sometimes the greatest freedom isn't running from chains, but choosing who you wear them for. And I choose him. Always him. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.